Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Hello. When I saw the very gentlemanly eulogy spoken by President Trump about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, it made me want to at least find out about this woman, about whom I knew very little, except that she was a bit of a thorn in the side of the right, and from the way they spoke about her, and that she was on the Supreme Court. Oh, by the way, eulogy. I would like to make this point. Anything with EU at the beginning, well, not everything, because the European Union begins with EU, doesn't it? But generally speaking, anything with EU at the beginning means good in some way, and logi from logos, words, you know. So it's good words. It's words spoken over the grave of somebody who's recently died. And that actually fits how Trump spoke of her. There's another saying, don't speak ill of the dead, isn't there? And yet I saw some awful things, celebratory things about her death from people who regard her as a liberal monster. I spoke in a previous video about Soros, and I got a lot of people accusing me of naivete. I am by no means naive about the effect that Soros has on everything, but you've got to remember it can't possibly ever be just one person doing these awful things. Look, most of the people who subscribe to my channel, if somebody came up to you and said, look, here's £50 or $100 or whatever, go and burn that shop down, would you do it? Most of you would not do that for any money. Go knock down that old man in the street. You wouldn't do it. You wouldn't be able to live with yourself afterwards. You'd have to want to do that. And then the money would help you along, would make things easier. So when you see Antifa people, it doesn't matter if, well, it does matter, but it doesn't matter 100% if they got some of their funding from some of Soros's foundations. The fact is they want to do it. And they probably do it for no money, possibly not quite with such organisation, but, you know, it's there. Look, you see how CNN and NBC fiddle the news and cut the film clips so one thing looks worse or something looks better, and then you find out what happened and you're angry. But it was the film editors, the script writers. They're not getting paid centrally. They're getting their salary from CNN or NBC. The BBC, I remember the Rayshard Brooks killing. The first thing the BBC did, and they are not in the pay of Soros, the first thing they did was start reporting, the American police have shot another black man in the back in a car park. That's how they reported it first off. This was plain lies and plain incitement, but it wasn't coming from some central thing. It was coming from a liberal mindset that wishes a nihilistic liberal mindset. In the BBC's case, that's coming from a real liberal hatred of America. But it's not coming from some evil genius from on high. You've got to remember that. It never is just one person. It's always because people want it to start with. So blaming it on one person isn't going to help. If you get that one person out of the way, it's not going to change things. As long as you've got Antifa in their different groups patrolling the streets of Portland, as long as you have black people in public housing or whatever, rioting and burning their own shops, this is where, and it's more complicated. It's easier to think of just one person, but no. Now, let's get back to Ruth Bader. Now, she really does have an effect because she is on the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court makes rulings that affect the lives of all Americans and sometimes the lives of other people in the world as well. So yes, she is somebody you can look at, but then she has other Supreme Court members there as well. And I'll get to my concerns about her in a minute. But there's no doubt she has lived a remarkable life, as President Trump said. And look, as I've seen people on Twitter celebrating her death, you should never celebrate anyone's death. You might get annoyed with how they live their lives, but the death of a human is the death of one of us, whether we like it or not. John Donne. I'm going to quote John Donne. I'll leave that for a while. All right. But I saw people celebrating her death and, playing, funny songs. I'm not going to tell you which one, but I'm quite sure some of you will have seen them or will have drawn the conclusion. And then on the other side, I've read people on Twitter saying, oh, President Trump wasn't surprised by this news. He knew it already. Somebody had already told him. And that's why he reacted so well. Well, that's very mean-minded, isn't it? But even if it was a surprise to him, which it could have been, he's probably been thinking about this for weeks and rehearsing in his mind what he'd say when the news came. Because Ruth Bader Ginsburg was dying. We knew that. If he hadn't prepared for her death in some way, then he wouldn't have been the sort of president he is. And the sort of president he is somebody who understands the media. In fact, he understands the media better than the media. He plays them like a fiddle. And this is what annoys them, I think, more than anything else. Trump did the right thing in the way he spoke. And when I looked at RBG's history, I absolutely, he got it absolutely spot on. She did live a remarkable life. And for those of you who don't know, I'll just go through it very quickly. I'm looking up here on Wikipedia. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was born in 1933 in Brooklyn, which was not a wealthy area. I don't know much about her family's financial circumstances, but they can't have been that great. Her older sister died of meningitis when she was about 1.5 or something, and then her mother died just before she graduated from high school, which is a terrible tragedy. Possibly to do with the fact that the family itself couldn't afford really good living conditions or medical attention. Ginsburg, so she would have had this history. I'm speculating here, but I think it was probably quite a poor household. Ginsburg spent much of her legal career as an advocate for gender equality and women's rights. Well, you can understand that because of her history. Look at it. She was born in 1933 when America was not in good... a lot of people in America weren't in good financial circumstances anyway. She lived in Flatbush, it says here, which is part of Brooklyn, apparently. I didn't know that. Her father was an immigrant and her mother was the daughter of immigrants. So again, these people who came here from Poland and Russia, they had nothing. They really had nothing when they came. And they were pulling themselves up by their own bootstraps. Let's see. She was. Her parents were Jewish. She was brought up in the Jewish faith, and her mother took her to the library a lot. It says here. You see, that's where it all starts. It starts with education. And I'm going to have to stop here. I've just got a message. I'm going to cut this. The neighbours having some construction work done, and they keep asking me questions about the fence. They might come back again. All right. Well, we have here a mother who made sure her daughter learnt stuff. Read books, got ideas about the world, didn't stick to one. In fact, this might be the answer we're looking for. There are a lot of black people now who think whitey is responsible for all their ills. And it looks to me like they're people who've never seen the other side of an argument. That's interesting, isn't it? Anyway, at the start of her legal career, Ginsburg encountered difficulty in finding employment, you see, because she was a woman, and this would have been, in the 50s. So, you see, this would have shaped her attitude to women's rights, and you can't really blame and equal rights, because she would have seen a lot of inequality as well in Brooklyn. There's not only Jews were discriminated against, but the many black people who were there in Brooklyn, and she would have been very aware of this. So you can understand her strong attitude. Now, you can also see that she got more stuck in her ways as she got older and more extreme with her ideas. This happens. Sometimes people mellow as they get older, and sometimes they get more extreme in their views. So she was a very remarkable woman who came from what looks like, so far as I can tell, a very disadvantaged family, whose early experiences obviously had an effect on her way of thinking, and who stuck to her guns all the time, except for one thing which really does puzzle me. Her daughter said that shortly before she died, she expressed the wish that she would not be replaced until the new president, until after the election and the new president had taken office. Now, she must have known that when a Supreme Court judge dies or leaves office, it's up to the president, whoever the president is at that time, to appoint a new one. I mean, he can not do it, but it's his right and privilege to do that. That's one of the president's jobs. So I don't know why she said that she wanted this not to happen. There are a couple of speculations I can make, and one of them is that she said she sort of hoped that it wouldn't happen to her daughter, and her daughter took it as a dying wish, or her daughter just made up the story. That is also possible. Anyway, it rather amused me when I saw a video by AOC, and I'm going to play that one. Actually, I'll play the Trump one as well, so you'll probably have seen that already. But the one from AOC is really funny. First of all, because she's looking down at the phone. And when I was watching it, I had this horrible feeling that I was strapped down to an interrogation table in room 101. And she was leaning over me. And then, apart from that, she was saying, this was her dying wish. And now Mitch McConnell, within an hour, the body wasn't even cold. Within an hour, Mitch McConnell was talking about replacing her. And this was terrible, terrible, terrible. No, it wasn't terrible, terrible, terrible. And it just shows how AOC has no real grasp of the American democratic system.
The very last dying wish of RBG was that her vacancy not be filled until the new president takes office in January. That was her dying wish. Tonight, Mitch McConnell publicly, the night of her passing, he couldn't wait 24 hours, issued a statement saying that he was going to give Trump a vote in violation of her dying wish.
This is sort of like a teenage daddy didn't buy me a pony type tone that she's using. So it's just, it is really ludicrous. The only problem is that people are voting for her. Anyway, that's another matter. So that's Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was a remarkable woman. Her views were formed by her early experiences, and aren't we all? People rejoiced at her death, which was nasty. Trump acted like a gentleman, and the left, predictably mean-minded, said that he'd rehearsed it. Well, maybe he had, and maybe he hadn't. It doesn't matter. That's what he said. And as for the people who rejoiced at her death, well, I can understand she was a stumbling block. She was a nuisance to some people, and she wasn't popular with some people, but she's still a human being. And you may say, well, I wish she'd been like this or like that or like the other, but she's dead and we shouldn't rejoice over her death. No man is an island, entire of itself. Each is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. Now, just a minute. What he's saying is that he talks about England being an island, and then a bit falls off it, and that diminishes the whole island. That's what he's saying. And a part of the main, which is interesting because the main means the sea as well as the main part. So he's joining everything together here. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less. As well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manor of thine own, your own manor, your own land, or I'm sorry, I'm doing this from memory, so, or of thy friends. Yeah. Each man's death diminishes me, for I am involved in mankind. Now, before I go to the final words, which everybody knows, I want to remind you of something. He was writing at a time when there were no newspapers, where things that were happening passed by word of mouth, maybe the odd town crier, but that was it. So you got an idea of what was happening in your community from the church bells. If you heard merry bells pealing, you know there was a celebration, probably a wedding. And then you'd get a servant or something, you'd say, go and find out from the church who's getting married or christened or whatever. And then you'd hear the muffled bell and you'd know there was a funeral, and you'd send a servant to find out who died. So he says, each man's death diminishes me, for I am involved in mankind. Therefore, send not to ask for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Graniopteryx design or Grambo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.graniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.